convening over a dozen quantum hackathons at IBM, Microsoft Azure, IEEE, etc. And today he will present on career opportunities in quantum technologies and quantum solution launchpad. Mr. Warden Siegel, welcome and thank you very much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you, Sehan, for such a lovely and humbling introduction. And thank you, Vakar, for extending the invitation. We, as Domain in Quantum, are very proud to sponsor this entire initiative. We really support you guys, and I love the way you have organizing this entire program. So kudos to that. And for today's session, the way I have divided my presentation is in two parts. The first part of my presentation, I'll be talking about career opportunities. If you are new to this particular field, how can you enter the industry? Whether you are a grad student, whether you are just stepping up into the industry, undergrads, or are you already pursuing your PhDs or postdocs, what are the things you should keep in mind before stepping into the industry? Or is quantum even for you, right? So we'll be trying to answer all these questions in the first part of the presentation. And the second part of the presentation will be about QSL. So QSL stands for Quantum Solutions Launchpad. That is a program we have been running at Domain in Quantum for quite some time now. A very exciting, very innovative program, and I'll talk more details about what it is, how can you be involved in that, and how can this program propel you into your journey for quantum industry, right? So we'll have two parts to this presentation. I believe all the questions will be putting on Discord. So I hope the moderators of the room will keep track of that. And I leave plenty of time in the end to answer all those questions. So at any point, if you do feel you have any questions, feel free to type them in the Discord chat and we can have a very informal discussion after my presentation. Okay, so with that, let's start with quickly the career opportunities, right? The first question before you even decide quantum is for you is something I like to ask everyone, and that is, before I begin that, a quick preview that everything I'll be talking about in this presentation are purely my thoughts. Make sure that nothing of this can be generalized or nothing of this can be set in stone. Every industry has their own needs. Every particular role will have specific requirements, and you cannot generalize anything to everything. That being said, I take a lot of this presentation from my own personal experience. So I started looking into quantum industry, I think, 5 years back. And the first article I went about was Jay Gambetta's article on the hitchhiking guide to getting a job in quantum computing. That was back in 2018, but still a lot of it is truly relevant. So anyone who wants to read more, I would point it to the first blog captioned over here. And then there were two more articles in successive years, one in 2021 by a very close friend of mine, Mikhail. He used to be at Zapata at that time. He's currently at PsyQuantum. Amazing researcher. And he also has a very fun blog called Musty Thoughts. So anyone who is interested in reading more about that, please go and watch this particular YouTube lecture. And the third one is by Olivia Lins. That was back in 2022. I realize all the three articles I mentioned are still a couple of years old, but a lot of things haven't changed in the industry. That being said, a lot of things have changed in the industry. So I'll try to make the comparisons over here. I'll take a lot of inspiration from these three articles, which helped me personally in my career. And I'll also share my insights on how you can take your career forward. So like I mentioned, this particular presentation is suitable for anyone who is starting to explore quantum computing, quantum technologies, and wants to get to the industry, but doesn't know if this is something for them, or maybe they are just confused how to enter into this industry. The first question I like to ask everyone is that, why do you feel you want to enter into quantum, right? And please do not give me the answer that quantum is fun, because a lot of things are fun. Taming a lion is also fun. It is super exciting, but not everyone wants to do that. There is a risk factor involved, and there's a risk factor involved in everything you want to do. So take a step back and start understanding what really excites you in quantum, and be very, very specific in that, right? You cannot come and say that, yeah, I just heard about quantum. Everything is quantum. Quantum is sci-fi. I like being in the hype cycle, and I just want to step with both my feet into this particular domain. And then after a couple of years, you realize that, oh my God, this is a huge mistake. I've wasted 2.5, or maybe 5 years down the line, you realize that I've wasted a lot of time in the industry. Even I do not like working on this, right? Because looking from the outside, it is a completely different field. But once you start working, there are a lot of complexities, there are a lot of things going on in quantum technologies, and you need to really understand what is happening. You always feel that the grass is greener on the other side. So take a step back, really reflect upon yourselves, what really motivates you in quantum. Being in the industry for now 3.5 years, I have realized that, and I've after interviewing a lot of people for hiring purposes as well, I've kind of realized some of the red flags, and this is something which you do not want to be included in, right? So if after asking yourself a question like why do you want to enter into quantum, you have one of these answers, it's a pretty good red flag that this is something not for you, or maybe you are just motivated for the wrong reason. If you think you can make a lot of money, um, we don't know yet, right? None of the companies right now are profitable as far as I know. So this might be a good encouragement. Like, yeah, potentially you could make a lot of money, but a lot of jobs can bring you a lot of money. So this is not exactly one of the strong reasons why you should enter in quantum. The other one I hear a lot is that it's the hot industry, right? It's something which everyone is talking about, similar to what is happening with Gen AI and machine learning as well, right? When all of your friends start talking about quantum this and quantum that, you just feel that peer pressure to just explore that. Completely fine, you can still explore quantum, but this should again not be a core motivation for you to pursue a career in quantum. Okay, so just take a step back, and I would advise really looking into the intricacies. The devil is always in the details, right? So just step back and reflect what all there is, what really interests you, what really excites you, and then make an informed decision whether this field is even for you. The third one, again, a lot of people just say that, yeah, this is my life calling. I was born to pursue quantum machine learning, and they just bullshit their way to a lot of years without even understanding that, yeah, quantum machine learning does involve a lot of things. You cannot say this, right? You cannot have a reason that this is your life calling. This is what I was born to do. This is what I was always want to do. That is not a real reason, right? Unless you have a tangible experience and you have done that and felt that and really experience what it is like to work in the quantum industry. And finally, beware of the hype, right? If any one of yours answer is that quantum plus crypto or AI or ML is something, 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 a really sci-fi thing, I can do a lot of change. I can change the world. I can change the entire ecosystem. Again, beware, right? There's a lot of hype going on. So make a very informed decision, whatever you want to do in quantum. Once you have a very good answer to why you want to really pursue quantum computing or quantum technologies for that matter, then you need to start getting yourself informed about what exactly are the career opportunities over here. And today, the career landscape is very varied, right? We have, like I like to describe quantum opportunities or career opportunities in this quantum domain into three sectors. The first one is purely research oriented. It requires a lot of your quantum knowledge plus a research mindset. And the first example I could give, which is the main scope of this workshop as well, superconducting qubit researchers. So anything you want to do on the research side, dealing with superconducting qubits, it could be chip design, it could be theoretical work, anything you want to do on the research side comes in this domain. And the same goes for any other thing as well, right? From quantum error correction to quantum control to quantum complexity theorists, quantum algorithms researchers, anything to do with a lot of quantum knowledge, plus a research aptitude fits in the first vertical over here. The second vertical I like to call as quantum plus an engineering aspect of it. Still, you need a lot of quantum stuff. You need to be aware of the quantum fundamentals. But over here, you have the flexibility of coming from a completely varied background. You no longer need a physics PhD or a PhD in computer science or etc. Even if you are coming from an engineering background, maybe with a master's or a bachelor's, and you are good enough at what specific thing you do, you might be able to carve out a very small niche for yourself in the quantum field, right? Ultimately, it's a combination of both these fields, right? One team does the research work, and then the other team needs to implement that research and bring those weird, exciting ideas to the real world. And that is where the engineering team steps in. A lot of both these roles are PhD oriented, but not all of them. So even if you're coming from a microwave engineering standpoint of view and you don't necessarily have a PhD, but you are very talented in your specific skill sets, you might find a job over here. The same goes for photonics, FPGAs, cryogenics, or maybe just plain and simple software developers, right? Everyone who is coming with a strong engineering background will be working with a very strong correlation with the quantum research teams, and together both these teams will end up making the core of the quantum careers. And the third one is non-quantum stuff. And this is where I feel a lot of people do not know what is happening, because everyone, when stepping into the quantum industry, is like, I need to study quantum. Fair enough. Yes, you need to be aware of everything quantum if you are interested in the first two verticals. But the third vertical is not exactly a quantum vertical, I would say. That is purely about building an industry, building a company. So, right from community builders to user experience to designers to business, sales, operations, management, product design, everything, right? Everything that is not exactly a quantum role are still very relevant roles in the quantum industry. So if you just want to enter this particular industry and you have no background in quantum at all, that's cool too, right? So just keep your eyes open and be aware of these kind of roles too. And that also brings me to another point, that as the industry evolves, there would be a lot more roles popping up in this non-quantum area, right? Because right now the industry is small, we are still picking up on a lot of research. So that is why most of the roles you come across are PhDs and postdoc level roles on the research side, or maybe a little bit on the engineering side. But as the industry will grow, as new opportunities come up, there will be a lot of roles popping up in the non-quantum area, because at the end of the day, you have a company and you want to build that company. And building a company requires a lot of non-quantum stuff than pure quantum stuff, right? So just being with a business mindset, or coming with a sales or operations background or management with a product skills or something like that will suit a very variety of roles over here, right? So just keep that in mind, that not always a quantum experience is necessary for entering into this industry. And the reason why I wanted to give this overview and a wide picture of everything that is happening in the domain is just to make yourself aware, right? You are interested in quantum, you want to explore opportunities, you do not really need to shift your education just yet, right? So you don't need to pursue a quantum specialization right away. I see a lot of students immediately pivoting to a quantum specialized education. I want to pursue a master's specifically in quantum computing or quantum technologies. I want to, let's say, pursue a PhD, which is focusing on quantum stuff. That's okay, only if you want to fit yourself in the first two verticals. But if you really want to enter the third vertical, which is a non-quantum experience, even your regular science degrees, or even maybe non-science degrees, maybe something in business administration or something in sales or arts or anything else would do just fine. You just need to be really, really confident in what you do and talented in the skills you pursue. And then I would recommend building domain expertise. So you see, I have had this opportunity to interact with a lot of people in the quantum industry, outside of the quantum industry, and a lot of students throughout the many years I have been involved in. And many a times I do come across people who are jack of all trades, but they do not have the flexibility of being an expert in one specific role. So I would, one takeaway from my presentation which you could take away is that build your domain expertise. Be a subject matter expert. It could be anything. It could be XYZ, anything. You could be an expert in the very, very small part as well. But unless you are an expert, you cannot build a career for yourself. Know your qubits in and out, but remember, even experts Google stuff. So it's completely open, and you should always be open to learning new stuff. But at the same point of time, be really confident in what you want to understand, right? Devil is in the details. So as much as you know, it's always better. I see a lot of people saying that, yeah, I want to pursue quantum machine learning, but I really don't want to study the matrix multiplications and the fundamental math which goes behind forming these algorithms, which is, to be honest, very, very nonsense, right? You cannot go beyond a certain level if you aren't very, very strong in your fundamentals. So make sure that you are very confident in the basic fundamentals of quantum computing, on your math, on your physics, and a variety of other subjects too. You should still have your STEM background as strong as possible. I would also say that brace for impact. It's like hope for the best, but at the same time, uh, be really, really aware of the negative sides too. What if quantum bubble bursts and you no longer have any of the quantum companies in the next 10 years? It is quite possible, right? None of us are even 100% sure that this is something which will go beyond 10 years. So brace for that kind of an impact, right? Make sure that your skills can hop industries. They are transferable skills. For example, let's say you want to dive into quantum computing. Obviously, you would have to be good at Python, you would have to be good at quantum algorithms. And as you keep on specializing in, let's say, quantum machine learning algorithms, do not forget your basics about classical machine learning algorithms, or do not forget the basics about a proper code implementation, writing a nice software code, being really thorough in collaboration practices, in your Git structures, in your Python, the basic fundamentals, right? Because prepare for the worst. What if 5 years down the line, there's no quantum industry left, right? So where would you stand then? You need not be hanging around just reskilling yourself once again. At that point, if you have a very strong skill set which is transferable to another industry, you can easily go back to AI or machine learning or maybe XYZ industry and say that, yeah, I have been working in a quantum team for the past 5 years, working on quantum machine algorithms. But you know what? I'm really, really good at classical algorithms too, because I have been doing that for a long, long time. So even though I do not have a specific experience in classical algorithms, I fit right into your team and we can have a chat and we can explore opportunities over there. So be prepared for that too. And while you are doing all of this, one question which always comes back to me is that how risky is this, right? Just because I mentioned 5 years down the line, there might not be a quantum ecosystem. How can you measure that risk? And are you suitable? Are you confident enough to take that risk? So this is like a Gartner hype cycle. You can easily find this image on a lot of review papers and a lot of analysis. And this particular hype cycle just gives you a good overview of how technologies progress over time. When you see at quantum technology, that's the first block over here, you would realize that this is still going on towards the peak of inflated expectations, right? So there's a lot of hype about this that, yeah, quantum can do this, quantum can do that. There might be a situation where quantum can potentially disrupt all industries. And that is how most technologies work, right? But be aware that after this inflation point, there always comes a throw of disillusionment where all the practicalities of these technologies come into the picture and everyone starts realizing that maybe all the expectations we had for this kind of technology aren't really true. So there's a lot of disappointment over here. There's a lot of practical realization to companies. Many of the startups just stop working out over here, and only a few who go through this trough of disillusionment really go into the slope of enlightenment and see that, yeah, these are the few use cases where there's practical implementation, there's a practical advantage, and this is how we will bring everything back into the industry. So quantum technologies, in a summarized way, still has a lot of way to go through this. And we all should be really practical that, yeah, there is a very good chance that in the future, things might not work in the ideal way, right? So please start preparing yourselves for that. I see a lot of startups popping here and there. One question which you should all be asking at your interviews for XYZ quantum startup is that, how long is their runway? Which in the startup talk basically stands for how much money or how much funds does a particular startup have to keep their work going for the next some time. And if the answer is maybe roughly about 18 months or so, that's a comfortable answer, right? Most startups, most healthy startups are in that kind of environment where they are ready for the next 18 months or so. They have a good trajectory planned out for the next 3 to 4 years. They can support you, they can support all the research. And while moving through that phase, they will continue bringing more people on board, more expectations on board, and more funds on board, right? So that kind of maturity is always good for you to understand. And they should also give you a very good answer of what kind of startups you should be involved in, right? Every now and then there comes a stage where there are a lot of startups popping up. And this is This is kind of expected when this expectation slope just keeps on rising and rising and rising, right? We had that dot-com bubble. We had that machine learning bubble. We will have the quantum technology bubble too. Many of the startups will just burst. They would no longer exist, right? So just make an informed choice whenever you are joining these kind of startups, and be very, very honest with the recruiters, be very honest with your expectations, and meet the expectations of what the company wants to do with it. Another question which I would like to try and answer today is that, do you need a PhD, right? Because that is another one of the fan favorites out here. Everyone keeps on asking that. Like, I am in the middle of my career. Most of the job recruitment adverts I come across are PhD. That is kind of a strict requirement. Do I need to pursue a PhD? I did not pursue a PhD. I might pursue one in the future. No one knows. And the same goes for a lot of my colleagues as well. Many of them come from a non-PhD background. And to answer that question, I would recommend this is not the correct question to be asked. The correct question would rather be, why would anyone want to hire you? This is not specific to quantum. This is, in fact, relevant to all the industries out there. Why should anyone take a bet and hire you? Why should anyone want to work with you, right? So to answer that, I would give this a very, very generic list of things which you should be able to demonstrate if you want to join a company, if you want to join an industry, and if you want to really put yourself out in the market for hiring purposes. The first one is plain and simple, your ability to conduct independent research. And this is, I think, true for any kind of technical role. If you want to enter the quantum industry, you should be able to take initiatives. You should be able to be confident and conduct your own experiments. Those experiments could be on the hardware side, on the software side. You should be able to do independent research. If you are still in the habit of being spoon-fed through a lot of things, maybe industry is not the correct choice, and maybe you still need a PhD to learn that kind of experience. But if you do understand that, yeah, if given a task, I can go through that roadmap, I can conduct independent research, I can take on the initiatives and deliver on different results on my own, then maybe you don't need a PhD at all. Domain expertise, software skills, right? Just like I mentioned in the previous slide, you need to build your own expertise. It could be in a very, very niche field as well. But as long as you can proudly say that, yeah, this is one skill set which I'm really, really confident about. I have spent years into self-learning, or maybe learning it through some course, or maybe pursuing an educational degree in that. And I have some projects to showcase for it. You are good and you are well covered. But if not, you should spend a lot of time building your expertise in specific domains. Make sure that you have very good software skills. And this is true for both hardware as well as software oriented roles. Everything needs to be done through a portal right now, right? Everything needs to have a software tools required for it. So make sure that you are covered on that aspect. Communication skills. Yeah. So this is something which goes beyond technical roles. Anywhere you work, you should be able to communicate very, very well with your team members and to your boss and to your subordinates. If there's a lack of communication, you will always fall short of explaining. Even if you have brilliant ideas, if you're not able to communicate very well to your colleagues, you will not have completed the work which you were supposed to do. Or maybe you cannot fulfill the ideas which you're just dreaming of. So communication skills are, again, very, very important. You should be able to work in a team. No one works alone, right? Every work you would end up doing would be a part of a large team. You would always have colleagues working with you, and you should be able to divide work, maintain relations with your team members, with your colleagues, and work in a very friendly environment. So make sure that you have learned that ability to work in teams, collaborate with people across boundaries, across cultural fits. Try to make yourself as suitable as possible to team building exercises as well. You should obviously have leadership qualities if you want to progress in your work. You should always have the ability to take initiatives. Not always would work be just put on you. And this is what I mentioned in the first point as well, right? Ability to conduct independent research. It all comes down to initiative, right? If you want to excel in whatever you want to do, You should be the one telling that, yeah, I want to pursue ABC stuff, and this is how I will pursue it. And then obviously your mentors and your guides or your boss will tell you that, yeah, this is maybe not the correct way to approach these things. Here are some recommendations. Go and be wild with them, right? Or maybe you are spot on. This is exactly the way we want you to work. Go ahead and fulfill the task you dreamt of. And finally, cultural fit. And this more or less boils down to where you want to work, or maybe which kind of team you want to work in. It is always important to find a good cultural fit so that you are happy while you're working at it. And coming back to the first question, PhD, well, PhD is a long time period which involves a lot of independent research and a lot of other exciting things, which prepares you with most of the skills I mentioned over here, right? So this is kind of a route to gaining all of these skill sets. If you feel that you are not confident enough in any of these skills, go ahead and do a PhD. It will be very important for you to develop these skill sets in the long term. On the other hand, if you feel that many of these above mentioned qualities are something which you have developed over time, working in industry or maybe working in XYZ different roles, you might not need a PhD, right? So make that informed decision. That being said, another point, if you remember the first slide I mentioned, right, where I divided quantum career opportunities into 3 different parts, quantum research, quantum engineering, and non-quantum roles. The first vertical, quantum research, will still be a primarily PhD-dominated domain, just because it comes naturally to PhD candidates. You have spent a lot of time doing research. You have a lot of experience doing independent research. So these kind of roles are suited for them. However, there are exceptions, and the other 2 roles, quantum engineering and non-quantum roles, obviously do not require a PhD. Just something to keep in mind if you are still confused whether you want to pursue this or not. And finally, if you are set on this way, I would recommend reach out and talk to quantum experts. There is a lot of noise in this domain. Every now and then, there are people claiming to be quantum experts. There are a lot of nonsense being spread around the world in this particular industry. And it's kind of natural because there is a lot of hype associated with it. So before you make any decision, try to talk with some expert which you feel has gone through that same cycle. For example, if you want to know anything about a PhD, I might not be the best person to talk to because I personally did not do a PhD, right? So always talk to someone who has gone through a similar roadmap because they would be the ones to guide you the best. If you want to talk something about a PhD, go to someone who has gone through a PhD and then take up roles in the quantum industry. However, if you, let's say, want to talk about quantum algorithms, go and talk to someone who is specializing in quantum algorithms. Do not talk to a quantum hardware scientist in that case, right? Because the trajectories are completely different. Make the informed choice. And when you're looking for experts, find the expert or find the professional who really has a very similar role to what you want to achieve in the next 5 years or maybe next 10 years, right? So avoid the noise and reach out and talk to quantum experts. And with this, I hit the halfway mark of my presentation. This is what I had to talk about career opportunities. Let me take a quick break over here to see if there are any pressing questions. And otherwise, I can go ahead and talk a little bit more about QSL and the Quantum Solutions Launchpad.
Actually, we have some questions.
Yes.
One question is, are there going to be any opportunities in quantum revolving around the high school students?
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you're a high school student, I believe you already are thinking of higher education, right? So one thing I would really recommend over here is that regardless of whether you find any opportunity right now in the quantum field or any other field, you should still at least go to college, at least join your university courses, right? Do at least a bachelor's in something, because that couple of years of fundamental undergraduate research or undergraduate courses are still very relevant and very important, not just for quantum, but for all industries. As far as opportunities go, Sure. We have had high school students working with us. We interact with a lot of students in this domain. So as long as you're motivated and you're ready to take up on challenges head on, yeah, opportunities are everywhere. You just need to find the right ones for yourself.
Thank you, Alex, for answer. One other question: what's our typical requirements for applying the quantum control researcher role? How does a day in their lives look like?
Very good question. And I'll be very honest here, I'm not the best person to ask this. And this slide very correctly demonstrate that I do not have a background in quantum control. And if I do say something, you should plain and simple ignore that, just because I'm not the best person. What I would generalize is that what kind of roles you should obviously be a very, very good and thorough research experience or maybe industry experience in that particular role. And if you want to know what is a day in the life of that particular role, go and find the best person, someone who is already working in that role, and talk to them.
Thank you. We have some other questions, but if you want, you can continue. We can ask other after that, which you like.
Okay, sure. Yeah, let me take another 5-10 minutes and go through the rest of my presentation, and then we can come back to the questions.
Okay. What is the quantum complexity theories, and what are requirements credentials to land a job as one?
Okay, so complexity theory basically revolves around theoretical side of things, where you are working more on the complexity of different algorithms. How do these algorithms scale? How is the speed up compared to the classical algorithms and the quantum algorithms? What type of quantum phenomena are responsible for these kind of potential speedups? So anything to do with the theoretical side of algorithm designing, or maybe just understanding how we process information in terms of quantum algorithms, everything over there comes under quantum complexity or quantum information theory, and it is a wide field. It is something which forms the fundamentals before you start building quantum algorithms. And these are completely two different fields. You do not obviously need to go through quantum information theory before you start developing algorithms. But on the other hand, you not always end up developing algorithms if you're coming from a quantum information theory field. So, right, very closely related, but two completely separate fields.
Okay, thank you. One question from Marcus. He say, I am a master's student at the Center of Cybersecurity and Cryptography Mathematics in Cameroon, more precisely in the option of embedded system security and cryptography. I would like to know how to connect this training with academic background, since I am really interested in quantum information processing, but also superconductivity quantum.
Yeah, very good question. I would recommend taking a three-pronged approach to this. Number one, start finding who is the best researcher to talk out there in this particular niche of a domain, right? Are there people already working in this conduction? The two fields you mentioned, are there people already involved in something similar? A second step would be also finding what kind of companies are out there. Maybe there are companies who are specifically focusing on this, or maybe they have already identified job roles and particular positions for these kind of roles, right? Once you identify both these things, I would recommend going there and talking to them. I just quick LinkedIn message could always help. Reach out to those experts, reach out to those companies, reach out to those hiring managers, and understand what are the expectations of these kind of a role, right? And then start tying it back to what you already know from your academic experience. See whether you want to pursue a PhD and make you more comfortable in that domain, or are you ready to step into the industry? If you are ready, then by all means, go into the industry, make yourself available in the marketplace. If not, then that's perfectly fine too. Pursue a PhD instead.
Thank you. Maybe you can continue. We can ask other questions later.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so as I was talking about, right, whenever you want to step into an industry, there are two ways. One, pursue a PhD. Number two, gain some industry experience. And both of these ways are just to make yourself really comfortable with all the skills, all the requirements of any particular role you want to pursue. We at Romanian Quantum understood this, and for the past 3-4 years, we have been building a lot of exciting things. And right now is a good time to describe some of those initiatives. The first one is a little bit about Womanium. So Womanium is a non-profit organization based out of Washington, D.C. And for the past many years, we have been diving into a lot of different technologies. The quantum is something which came to us very recently. Beyond that, we have a lot of other domains as well, from neuroscience to astrobiology to space technologies to many, many other exciting fields, all with the focus of creating the scientific leaders of tomorrow and encouraging more women in STEM. That was the core motivation, right? In 2022, we had the first quantum program, which ended up being an entrepreneurship program as well. We helped a lot of startups in this space. And the following year, we combined quantum computing with sensing and communication technologies. This year, we had a core focus on Quantum Solutions Launchpad, where we involved quantum, we involved AI, and we tried to get a lot of opportunities right from the industry to the students coming out of our program. Over the course of these years, we have very proudly trained over 8,300 quantum scholars. I'm very, very proud of this number because this reflects that over 120 countries, we have really tried to make our impact. We have had a long course with different modules, different types of lectures, different types of educational materials. And yeah, if anyone of you is interested in learning more, you can simply type Womanium Quantum in your Google and enroll into our programs. We have summer programs, we have other things as well. So just keep that in mind and try to join us, and we'll definitely help you out in your careers. Throughout the course, one thing we really realized, and this is bringing my discussion back to the point, either you need a PhD or you need industry experience. And we try to bring this program called the QSL, or the Quantum Solutions Launchpad, as a mix of both these things. While you are looking for your next step, this is kind of a part-time research fellowship opportunity which Womanium provides for you to just have a flavor of what it is to work into the industry. Right, so we are not pushing you right away into the industry. We are not just picking you up and throwing into the sea and say that learn swimming under the high tides and aggressive waves. We are not doing that. Instead, we are slowly holding your hand and helping you swim in a swimming pool first. We are giving you a taste of what it is to work in the industry. Just getting your hands dirty. And the way we do that is we bring the best participants out of a program and mentor them. We provide you with the best guidance, with weekly check-ins, with milestone-based evaluations, and the opportunity to work on some real-world industry projects with one of the best of the best of the best organizations in the world, right from the US Naval Nuclear Laboratory to E.ON, which is one of Europe's largest energy utility providers, to Fraunhofer Institute, again, Germany's one of most premier research institutes, to quantum companies like Classic or Xanadu, to Qubrid. We have a lot of organizations involved in this cohort, and we really like to provide this opportunity to all the students who are really interested in entering the industry, right? So we do not have a criteria over here, whether you are a high school student or whether you are a PhD or a postdoc. This opportunity is open to everyone as long as you can showcase your skill sets and your motivation to complete the work. Right? The application process for this is pretty simple. The first is straightforward way. You come into our program, learn throughout the summer, get some relevant skills, complete all the assignments, and you directly get enrolled into QSL. The second is a bit more informal, where you just apply onto our webpage, and we host these projects on a rolling basis throughout the months. Whenever we find a good fit, we just reach out to you. We conduct a couple of interviews, feel that you are a good fit, and we involve you into this program. The best part of this entire program is that this is a remote opportunity, and this is available to everyone. And by everyone, I mean everyone. Your nationality, your residence, your age, your academic qualifications, nothing matter over here, as long as you are really, really good in your skills and you are motivated to showcase that to us and work with us, right? So this is one program I would like to really highlight. And to give you a little sense of what all fellows have been able to do in this program, I'll give you 3 quick examples of some of our past projects. This is a comprised list of the different projects our team have been working on. These are some of the public projects. Many of the other projects are IP protected, so we obviously cannot share them. But yeah, this can give you a sense of what all QSL enables the fellows to perform and deliver. One example which I would like to start with is warehouse optimization using quantum computing algorithms. Think of this as a very, very large warehouse. Imagine an Amazon warehouse or Alibaba warehouse where there are a lot of items, a lot of stacks, a lot of things moving in and out on a daily basis. And there are robots over there which move around this massive, massive warehouse just to pick the right item and get it delivered to you within a span of 2 hours. So whenever you next order on your mobile phone for the next item for your home delivery, and before that reaches your home or your doorstep, just think of this particular use case, right? There's a lot of optimization and logistics happening in the warehouse itself before that item or before that object gets picked up for your delivery. And doing this is a really, really hard problem. We have a lot of shelving units, we have a lot of picking stations, and there are robots which are assigned to do that. So the question is, which robot picks which shelf and takes it to which picker, and how does all this happen in a span of seconds? This is an NP hard problem. This has been mathematically studied for a long, long time. And our QSL team was able to do a very quick and a very thorough survey on everything that is happening, from using QPUs, which are pure quantum techniques, to using a hybrid solver, to also understanding what are the current state of arts on the classical algorithms. Team did a very, very great job. Very proud of the work which these fellows did in collaboration with a lot of industry providers as well. The team achieved amazing results. I won't go into the specifics of what these graphs obtained, but just to give you a quick takeaway, the team was able to achieve 66% faster optimization algorithms than the current classical approaches being used in the warehouse problem. This was huge. This was really one of the primary use cases, which is now public, and our team at QSL was able to do that. Again, remember, these are not professionals who are doing this project, right? These are just PhD students and students just like yourself who were given the right mentorship, given the right opportunity, were able to exemplify and really prove themselves. So this is just a quick example of that. Another opportunity, another project I would like to share is something about QKD. This might be more relevant to this particular workshop because a lot of the work which was done over here was about chip design. So QKD stands for quantum key distribution, and the main goal over here was to encrypt satellite communication so that it is quantum safe. So whenever you see of different satellites, there's communication happening between them, and we all know there's a quantum threat looming around that, yeah, once quantum computers are ready, we might be able to hack into all the current encryption standards. Nothing is safe anymore, so we all need to start moving towards PQC or QKD, post-quantum cryptography, and stuff like that. One approach over there is, or maybe one question to answer over there is, how can we start making our encryption secure today so that it is okay in the next future? We are still confident about the encryption in the near future. What the team implemented was QKT for free space satellite communication. And most of the work was revolved around creating photonic chip designs for QKT, right? So this kind of ties back to the scope of this particular workshop and this particular event, Superconducting quantum chip design. Much of the work is still online and you can do it remotely, right? But the end goal in this project was to actually create those chips. The team is currently in the process of fabricating those chips from a foundry, and potentially in the next year or so, we would be launching a CubeSat with those chips installed in them, and having this quantum safe encryption between satellite communications demonstrated in a practical view. So again, a very, very large scope and a large mission over here, but I'm very proud of the team which has been working on this for quite some time now. The final project I would like to demonstrate is about VQAs for solving Poisson's equation. Poisson's equation is an equation which has been studied for quite some time now, and there have been improvements for a long, long time. But what the team was interested in understanding is that how can CFD equations or Poisson's equations be efficiently simulated on a quantum computer? Are there specific ansatz which find good solutions of this Poisson's equations, and can tensor networks be used for defining these ansatz? So that was the whole idea behind this particular project. This project was done for a long, long time. Currently, the paper is in review, and the team won significant grants from UMD, QLab, INQ, presented their works at different conferences. The pictures you see on the right-hand side of my screen are some of these images, which were taken at the different lab visits and different conferences. And similar to this project, there's another project, one final one, about quantum sensors. So this is something which is not at all related to quantum computing, a completely different technology in itself, quantum sensors. Amazing technology, but unfortunately, these sensors are really bulky. These are huge. And the question is, how can we make these sensors portable? How can we make them compact? How can we make them cost effective so that we can easily transport them? We can use them for multiple applications. And the entire team was working on how can we have smaller designs for these kind of sensors. Amazing work. Currently, this is IP protected, so I won't be able to share much details over here, but the team is actively pursuing to make this entire project open source, so that in the next few months, if anyone is interested in pursuing this particular project, they can easily hop onto the open source available, read through the guidelines, read through the tutorials, and build your own portable quantum sensor in your graveyard, in your warehouse or something, right? So anything you want to do will be made possible during this. Still a work in progress, but I'm very optimistic about what the team develops over here. Again, this team was invited to a lot of interesting conferences. They were also given the opportunity to visit the NETL lab, National Energy Technology Lab, one of the largest energy labs in the US, to present their work to the leadership team over there. And they were also invited to the Quantum Tech Conference in Washington, DC, to present their work. So this entire QSL program is just to give you the opportunity to connect with a lot of our partners, including the 85 plus partners mentioned on the screen, but many more as well. We try to partner with the best of the best organizations and get them to you, right? So this is a program designed for students. This is a program defined for professionals. And connect with us, connect to see how you can grow your quantum trajectory. QSL is one of the many initiatives we have at Momentum, and I'll be very happy to engage with all the students there. I'll be very happy to encourage you to apply over here. So anyone who wants to be a part of this QSL program, you can take a screenshot of this particular slide, see the web page linked over here, go to this particular web page, submit your resume, submit your profile, and we'll be reaching out to you whenever there's a good fit for the project. Remember that we work on these projects on a rolling basis throughout the year. So we don't specifically have summer or winter internships, although we do have a lot of fellowships during the summer and winter months, but also throughout the year. So just submit a resume over there. We will definitely take it into consideration, and we'll be reaching out to you on a rolling basis. As and when new projects come to us, we offer these opportunities to the students and look through all the profiles, filter the best candidates, and reach out to you. So this is fairly a very transparent progress. So just take a screenshot and feel free to submit your resumes for help. And finally, this is my contact. If anyone of you wants to reach out to me personally, I'm always available over LinkedIn as well, or maybe Discord, or if you want to reach out over mail, this is my email. Feel free to reach out. Feel free to put your questions to me as well. Happy to engage in discussions. And with that, I'd like to end my talk for today. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sehan, and thank you, Vagar, for inviting me here.
Thank you very much for such a great presentation, Mr. Vardan. But we have some questions again. One question is, can you please talk a bit more about the overlap of error correction and quantum FPGA engineering?
Sure. So as far as I remember, these are two completely different fields. There might be some overlap, and you have to dive deep into that on your own. I'm not the best person to talk about that. But quantum error correction is very relevant today, both on the software end, but also on the hardware end. We need to learn about these processes and how can we reduce the errors which are coming inherently to some of these quantum algorithms, and how can we reduce the error just because we aren't able to create efficient machines just yet. So this is a very relevant field, and this is going to be relevant for a long time. FPGA control systems, honestly, I'm not the best person to talk about that. So yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. One other question from Norman. What is the best way to approach and export or get their attention, especially for someone studying in third world country with a very little exposure to research?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's true for a lot of students, I would say, irrespective of where you are. Obviously, some countries have little exposure, some are not as well connected as the Western counterparts we have. But I think in today's digital world, nothing is not accessible to you. Just identify the researchers, pester them on emails, reach out to them on LinkedIn, just stalk them really, really motivationally. I wouldn't say disturb them and just be on to them, but yeah, following up with them on emails or maybe on LinkedIn obviously helps. So yeah, that is the way I would approach, and that is the way I would recommend anyone approaching some experts over there.
Thank you, as I do say. Okay, one other question from Sunekarki. What are research internship opportunities are available on quantum computing for master physics graduates, research scholar?
There are a lot of opportunities. Today, I think most of the quantum companies out there are hosting some internships, hosting some residence programs, hosting summer schools, hosting a lot of different opportunities, right? So just keep an eye out for them. One quick way to keep yourself informed is being active and being involved in a lot of LinkedIn activities and discussions. I personally feel that's a really good platform to grow your network and be informed of the different things that are happening in the quantum ecosystem. Follow the right people and you'll be informed about the best opportunities. And if you're not exactly getting internship opportunities just yet, do not feel demotivated. It happens with the best of us. Just sometimes you may not be the right person. Maybe the timing is not right. That by no means is a good reflective of your technical skills. So even if you're not getting internships, keep hustling, keep working on your projects. Try to demonstrate your skill sets in some other way. Maybe do a personal project, maybe do a research project with some mentor, maybe participate in hackathons. Hackathons are an amazing way to showcase your skill sets, right? So maybe perform projects like the one in this particular event, right? In this workshop, superconducting circuits. Perfect opportunity for you to showcase your skill set. I would very strongly recommend everyone in this program to do these projects, because then that would be a very good showcase for you to highlight your skill sets. Just putting it on your resume that, yeah, my name is Vardhan, I am an expert in quantum computing, doesn't really reflect that. But let's say I were to put that, yeah, my name is Vardhan, I have built a project for the past 6 months on quantum machine learning for XYZ application, and these are the good results I have showcased, maybe published a paper or maybe presented at some conference. That would feel a lot more factual and a lot more stronger than generic application. So do as many projects as possible, do as many collaborations as possible. That would be my recommendation to everyone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warden Segal. It was really an inspirational talk from my side. I enjoy a lot, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Sehan. Yeah, it was a pleasure being here. Thank you once again for inviting me. And yeah, all the best for the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Everyone, now we continue with our speakers, Dr. Felix Klaus Ahrens. Firstly, I want to introduce him a little. Dr. Felix earned his master's degree in physics from the University of Uppsala in 2016 with a thesis on cryogenic integrated photon and photon detectors for rare events surges, and later pursued doctoral studies at Heidelberg University with a thesis microwave secured multiplexing readout for cryogenic microcalorimeter arrays. After receiving his PhD in 2022, as a postdoc, he worked on levitated micromagnets in cryogenic traps at the Institute for Photonics and Nanotechnology in Toronto. And since 2023, he's a research scientist at the Bruno Kistler Foundation in Toronto. His scientific research covers superconducting circuits based on Josephson junctions and high kinetic inductance material, as well as hybrid mechanical system coupled to superconducting circuits. And today he will presenting the lecture building structure for superconducting quantum circuits. Mr. Felix, happy to have you here, and thank you very much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'm giving my presentation actually on behalf of Federica Mantegazzini, who actually was invited to give this talk, but unfortunately she got sick, and so she can't give it today. So she asked me to give that talk. I quickly share my slides.
Sure.
So I hope now everybody can see my screen.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. So yeah, as I said, I'm giving the talk on behalf of Federica Mantegazzini, who got sick today, and she prepared this presentation, so I'm giving it her presentation on the building instructions for superconducting quantum circuits. My name is Felix Ahrens, and I'm very happy to give this lecture today. To begin with, just some very basics that probably all of you are very familiar with, what makes superconductivity special. And the first thing is that if you look at normal metals, you will notice that you have charge carriers, which are single electrons, which behave like fermions. And so they can basically they're each in their own quantum states, and they have to each be described by their individual wave function because of the Pauli exclusion principle. So that's very complicated as a system to describe if you want to address them. However, it's different. If you have a superconducting material, the electrons will form pairs, Cooper pairs, which behave as bosons because we have now two spin half particles. So they form a pair. They're a boson, and that these bosons do not have to follow anymore the exclusion principle of Pauli, so they can now condense all into a common ground state if we reduce temperature and their energies. And as they're all in a collective ground state, they can also be described by a collective wave function. And having superconducting materials being extended macroscopic objects, we now have a macroscopic quantum phenomenon. So we have really a material or an object where we can put our hands on a quantum phenomenon. We have just some macroscopic quantum phenomenon that we can work with and that we can use to make circuits. And so why is it interesting to use superconducting circuits? As I said, we now are at a macroscopic level, and we can use classical elements. So just really pieces of metal, capacitors, whatever we like to build circuits. And these circuits, being superconducting, will have some sort of quantum behavior that we can make use of. And that's why superconducting circuits are so interesting. There are also a few things that come along with being superconducting. The first thing being, at least in DC, we have absolutely no dissipation. In RF, we will have some dissipation, but it's very little. As a second thing, we have some nonlinear element, the Josephson junction, which basically comes more or less for free with superconductors that we can use to build circuits, because as soon as you have nonlinearity, interesting things start to happen, and you can actually start to build devices out of that. The next thing is, if you work with superconductors and if you want to make Josephson junctions, for example, which are the nonlinear element in these circuits, you can use standard planar microfabrication techniques, which are well established because of all the semiconductor electronics that exist. And so it's very easy, at least in first approximation, to make these circuits. Of course, if you look into the details, it will get complicated, but at least in the beginning, you will have all the tools more or less available. And the next thing is, you are working at very low temperature, which means that also the noise that is present there is, at least the thermal noise, is a very, very low, which of course makes it very interesting, because the lower the noise, the better for your application. You read out whatever you want. Signal to noise ratio is always a key parameter. And if we now start to work with superconducting devices, we only have a few building blocks. We can make capacitors, planar capacitors. We can build inductors. We have nonlinear elements like the Josephson junction, and these few elements we can just put them together and build circuits out of them. And with these few elements, we can do a vast, vast amount of different circuits that will behave in the way we design them to. So for example, we can put together all these elements to make a qubit, for example, which is the basic element, as you know, for many applications, both in quantum computing and quantum sensing. But why do we need a nonlinear element in our circuits? Why is it not sufficient to just have like regular linear elements like an inductance or a capacitance? If we just look, for example, at an LC circuit, just like a regular harmonic oscillator, we will notice that we have, if we describe the system, we will see that the energy levels of the system are formed by this parabola where the levels are equidistantly spaced. And that, of course, is something that if you want to make use of such a circuit, for example, as a qubit, is a problem, because you cannot exploit these different levels individually as to store information or to do some processing, because you cannot address them individually. As soon as you try to look at one transition or to initiate one transition, you will basically start to populate all levels and have transitions between all levels, because the energy spacing is just equidistant, which is something that we can, however, solve if we introduce some nonlinearity. And the nonlinear element is the Josephson junction. So the Josephson junction in first approximation is just an inductance that however, has some nonlinearity that allows us to make this equidistant spacing of the energy levels non-equidistant anymore. And this non-equidistant spacing is what we call anharmonicity. So we now, if we want to address like one transition between two levels, there's exactly one energy that will do the trick, or one frequency that will do the trick, and it will not start to cause transitions between other levels. So but in this way, having this addressability of transitions between two levels, we can now suddenly make use of them to store, for example, information, or to use them in our quantum processors. And that's why it's like very important to have this nonlinear element, and we have to be able to make it in a very controllable way. So just to recap the basics, what is a Josephson junction? So how is it composed? Like, what does it do? Why is it a nonlinear inductance? So as I mentioned before, if we have a superconductor, it's basically it can be described by one macroscopic wave function, because all the Cooper pairs are condensed into the ground state, and that's just like described by one wave function for the ensemble of all Cooper pairs. If now we bring two Cooper pairs A and Cooper pair B together and just separate them by a weak link, and this weak link can be just like a constriction, it can be some barrier of a non-superconducting material like an insulator, or also a normal metal, then the two wave functions in the two superconductors will overlap through this weak link, and some sort of interference will happen. And these superconductors each have a wave function which is described by its phase, which is phase A and phase B. And so through this weak link, we will have some phase difference that is just given by the difference of the two phases. And having such a simple circuit gives rise to some very, very rich dynamics, which have been derived by Brian Josephson. And he noticed that there will be a tunnel current through this junction here, which can be described in the way of with this first Josephson inductance, where we have the current as a function of time is given by the critical current times the sine of the phase difference. And so as long as we have a current that is tunneling, or that is going through the junction that is smaller than this critical current, we will have this relation between the current and the phase difference. Additionally, we will have some time evolution of the phase that is associated with the voltage across the junction. And the dynamics that we observe here are given here in this IV characteristic that you see up here, where if you look here at 0, if we start to ramp up a current, the current will initially be a super current. So we have no voltage drop here until we reach the critical current. From the critical current, then we start to break Cooper pairs. We get quasi-particles, so basically electrons, and we jump here to the gap voltage. The gap voltage is basically the superconducting gap that separates the Cooper pairs from the or the energy level of the Cooper pairs from the quasi-particles, and then we get into this normal conducting branch. Going backwards, we have some dissipation because the quasi-particles, in contrast to the Cooper pairs, dissipate energy. We will not immediately jump back to the superconducting branch, but we will instead go down here and then go back to 0. And in the negative branch, it's basically just the whole thing specular. But the important thing of this thing here, which characterizes the Josephson junction, is that if we combine the two Josephson equations, so the current and the voltage equations, we will notice that we can relate the current to a change, the voltage to a change in current, and voltage with respect to a change in current is an inductance. So this inductance here is then simply called Josephson inductance. And as you can see, this inductance is not constant. It will depend on the phase across the weak link. And in that way, it is a tunable inductance that is nonlinear. And therefore, it's basically the standard element to make nonlinear circuits and to, for example, build qubits. Now, if sorry, for some reason the slides don't go on. No, sorry. Now, if we define a generalized flux variable, which basically just means we are integrating over the voltage, we see that this generalized flux is something that is just related to the phase difference across the junctions. And we can rewrite the Josephson equations with this generalized flux in such a way that we have the current across the junction as a function of a flux. And we see that the flux change will just be equal to the voltage across the junction. With this generalized flux picture, we can then look at what is the energy of the Josephson junction. So we're just integrating over the power, plugging in I and V. So I is simply given by this expression of the first Josephson equation, and V is simply the change in flux. And we end up with what we have here on the right side. We have a fixed constant, which is basically given by the critical current, which we call EJ, which is the Josephson energy, which is basically the energy of the junction, with times a factor that is flux dependent, meaning that our energy of the Josephson junction is flux dependent. The important takeaway here is that this EJ, the energy of the junction, is dependent on the critical current. So if we have control on the critical current, we have control on the Josephson energy. This Josephson energy is an important parameter as it characterizes different types of qubits. If we look here on the left hand, so what I mentioned before is basically just a harmonic oscillator, which is given by where the Hamiltonian is given by some charging energy term and some inductive energy term. And if this whole thing gives rise to the parabola that you see above, where on the x-axis you have the superconducting phase or the generalized flux, but you will notice that there is like that you have a regular parabola with equidistant spacing. On the right-hand side, you see the a transmon qubit where you have a Josephson junction instead of a linear inductance, which gives rise to an Hamiltonian where the inductive energy now is flux dependent instead of the left-hand side where we have this flux independence. And therefore, we do not have a regular parabola, but we have this anharmonic system where we have non-equidistant spacing between the levels. Now we can look at the first term of the Hamiltonian, where we just summarize everything into a charging energy times the numbers of the charge carriers in the on the island of the on the capacitively separated island, and we have the inductive energy, the Josephson energy, which now is also dependent here on the phase or on this generalized flux. Now, if we have now these two energies as characteristic parameters of different types of qubits, and we can make use of our engineering of our superconducting circuits to adjust these variables to our liking. If, for example, we look at such a circuit here where we have one of those nonlinear resonators where we have a Josephson junction in parallel to a capacitance. And we have this island here separated from ground by another capacitor. We have a separated island here from which particles, superconducting Cooper pairs can tunnel to a reservoir and back through the Josephson junction. In this case, of course, we might have some external voltage applied, which either is because we applied or simply because in our environment there is some voltage present, which gives rise to some shifts. So we not only have the charge carriers that we have on our island, but we might have some offset that is induced by some voltage source. If we now look at the number of charge carriers and we look at our energy diagram for a system where our EJ over EC is equal to 1. We are in this parabola picture where we have many parabolas that are shifted with respect to each other, and due to some avoided level crossing, we open some gaps here. And such a system is called a Cooper pair box, where the EJ over EC is roughly 1 or smaller. And this kind of a system is already a qubit. However, it has some downsides. The first thing is we have a very large charge dispersion. So for different values of ng here, you see that the gaps that is open has like at integer values is very large, and at half integer values is very small. On the other hand, we also have a rather steep dependency of the energy on the number of Cooper pairs, and therefore we might suffer from noise and fluctuations of this number of Cooper pairs. On the other hand, we have a very large anharmonicity, which is great. So this is something that is on the positive side. But what we would like to do is we would like to have something where the charge dispersion is less pronounced, and we also don't have that much of a charge sensitivity. And this is where the transmon qubit comes into play. Sorry, my slides are stuck for some reason. No, sorry. So the transmon regime is the regime where we engineer our EJ over EC to be larger. How do we do that? We basically introduce a system where we have 1 or 2 Josephson junctions with their energies EJ and the energies EJ and the capacity CJ of the junction. And besides the junction capacitance, we introduce another capacitance which is in parallel to the junction. This capacitance in parallel will allow us to tune the EC, so the charging energy. And if we reduce our charging energy, we increase our EJ over EC, which brings us to the transmon regime. Transmon regime means EJ over EC is way larger than 1. What happens if we go to EJ over EC way larger than 1 is what you can see in those two plots. If we have an EJ over EC, for example, around 10, we get already quite nicely spaced energy levels, which are still somewhat unharmonic, but we get way less charge dispersion, and we have also way less offset charge sensitivity. If we go to an even larger EJ over EC, we completely eliminate basically the offset charge sensitivity and also the charge dispersion at the cost of getting a reduced unharmonicity. Here I would like to mention that the unharmonicity scales with the square root of EJ over EC, or 1 over the square root of EJ over EC, while the charge dispersion scales with the exponential of EJ over EC, meaning that overall, going to the transmon regime, we still gain with respect to what we had before in the Cooper pair box. Now, if you want to build such a circuit, then you basically have multiple tuning parameters with which you can adjust your EJ over EC. If you look here, the EC is proportional to 1 over the capacity. So if you build your circuit, you can adjust your capacity. On the right side, you see a typical layout of such a transmon qubit, where the capacity, the shunt capacitor CB, is given by this cross, and by the size of this cross and the gap with respect to the ground plane around, you can adjust your charging energy. Then you have an EJ, which, if you have two squids that are two junctions forming a squid, can be tuned with an offset flux. So if you have a flux line, you might you're able to tune your EJ with the offset flux. And of course, you can change your EJ for each of these junctions by simply adjusting the critical current of your junction. So that gives us quite some tuning parameters. With capacitance, we can simply play with the layout of the capacitor. The external flux, we can control it simply by running a current. And the critical current is basically engineered by the area of the junction and the barrier thickness, like how much oxide, for example, we have between two aluminum electrodes in a junction. Having these parameters, we can plan our layout. We can basically design our qubit in such a way that we are in the regime that we would like to have, for example, in the transmon regime. Now, how do we build a Josephson junction? For this, I would like to go through the basic toolbox of microfabrication. We need a substrate, typically silicon wafers, a clean room. We need to somehow pattern our structures on the substrate. We need to deposit films. We need to be able to do a lithography, which basically is used for the patterning. And we need some methods to remove material that allow us to pattern the structure into the metal that we have deposited. I would like to start with the substrate. Just a very short overview. We are using typically silicon substrates, so high purity single crystalline wafers, but also other substrates are possible. Just silicon is abundantly available as it's used in semiconductor industries. And for this, there are two ways how these silicon wafers can be done. There is like one method that is the Tucholsky process, where we simply have some molten silicon that we start to melt, and with a seed that we introduce into the molten silicon, we can pull out a single crystal that then can be diced into wafer slices. This is typically a process with rather poor quality of silicon wafers, or we can use the floating zone process, where we have some polycrystalline piece of silicon that then is molten with some RF coil, and while the RF coil is moving through this piece of polycrystalline silicon, the crystal structure rearranges and we get a single crystal, and the impurities will move with the RF coil because they tend to stay in the molten part, and therefore we get a high purity silicon that we can use for our wafers. Then we need a clean room. There are different classes of clean room. I don't want to bother you with the details, but they are categorized by how much impurities of which size there are in the air. And of course, depending on how clean your clean room needs to be, you need to have different methods of maintaining a clean air or creating clean air, and also what you have to wear inside the clean room in order to not contaminate it depends on the clean room class. In a clean room, there are different methods how you can replace air. There's a turbulent flow method, which, however, typically tends to distribute dirt, or there's a laminar flow method where you introduce air from the top, it flows to the bottom, and with it, all the dust that might be present somewhere or that is shed from the operators in the clean room is removed towards the floor and then pumped out of the clean room. In general, there will never be a clean room that is perfectly clean. There's always dirt, but the idea is just to dilute it as much as possible, the dirt, and to move it to the floor where it's not harmful. Then patterning methods. So how do we actually grow our structure, or how do we prepare our structures for the qubits? There are two different processes. There is a subtractive process where first we add material to our substrate, and then we remove the part that we do not need. Or there is another process, which is the additive process, which you see below is the lift-off process. So basically, we first define our structure by some sort of photoresist and add the material afterwards. And by taking away the photoresist, we lift off the metal that we do not want to have, and we create our structures in that way. And to run you through the details of how we can do that, I want to now go step by step through the subtractive process, meaning the etching process, where first we have the deposition part, secondly we have the photoresist and structuring part, etching, and then the final cleaning. And for the deposition, we have different methods. We have physical vapor deposition or sputtering deposition, where we which we can use to bring our materials onto the substrate. Typically, here we have a sputter target, which we between the sputter target and the substrate, we create a plasma that will take away material from the target, and it will be brought to the substrate where it's then growing a film. A similar but somewhat slightly different process is the chemical vapor deposition, where also we can grow thin films on our substrates. We can also use e-beam evaporation, where basically we just evaporate our substrates with an e-beam, and then we evaporate our material with an e-beam, and then it's deposited on our substrate. All of these processes have their respective pros and cons. For aluminium technologies, most often e-beam evaporation is used. However, in the clean room where I'm working, we actually use sputter deposition. Here is like how sputtering works. As I mentioned before, we have our substrate, which is connected to ground. Above, we have our material, our target of, for example, aluminium. We introduce an argon gas into at a very low pressure, which we can then use to create an argon plasma. The argon plasma will remove material from the target, and then we can apply a voltage between our material and the substrate, and therefore the target ions that we have taken out of the target will be evaporated, will be moved towards the substrate through the electric field, and on the substrate they will form our film. With this, basically, we have our deposition. We have now, for example, a silicon wafer with an aluminum film on top, and now we somehow need to create a structure in that aluminum film, for example, for our qubits, for resonators, for whatever readout lines we would like to have on our devices. For this, we need to pattern a structure, which happens typically with a lithography step, meaning we put, for example, in the case of a positive resist, where we already have here in orange our where in orange we have our photoresist that then we can cover with a mask in black, exposing it. Part of this photoresist becomes soluble, and if we then develop it, we end up with a structure where we have photoresist on those areas where we before had our mask, and where we didn't have a mask, we can solve out the photoresist. If now this mask has the structure of, for example, a qubit, then we will have a qubit structure in our photoresist on top of our substrate. Also, the inverse is possible, which is simply called negative resist, and image reversal, which is technical details. But the basic idea is that we transfer our desired structure from a mask through illumination into a photoresist, which is a photosensitive material. We develop that, and in that way we create an image of the structure we would like to have on our substrate. Having now our substrate prepared with the photoresist, we can, for example, prepare some metal film on top. For example, in this case here, you see the photoresist has like masks here on the left and the right, the positive resist. We expose it with UV light, for example. We get the central part soluble. We deposit our film, and then where we have no photoresist is where the metal film will stay on the substrate, and where we have the photoresist, the metal will be removed together with the photoresist in a later step. If you use positive or negative resist, will affect how the edges of the photoresist will look like if you have an undercut or an overcut, and that will also have an impact on if your film grows continuously over your substrate and your photoresist, or if there is some interruption, which can be desirable to get better defined structures in the case of the negative resist. How do we get our structures into the photoresist? As I said, we can use a mask, where we have our mask simply in on a piece of glass that has the same size as the wafer or slightly larger. And some areas of the glass are patterned in chromium. We have some chromium, which will create a shadow, and the rest of the glass plate is open. So if we shine UV light through it, the parts of the chromium, the parts of the mask where there's chromium will make a shadow on the photoresist. The photoresist will not become soluble in the case of positive resist, and the other parts will. Here we basically have to draw our entire wafer on one single mask. Another concept is the stepper, where we have simply small pieces of essentially a mask that are step by step moved over the wafer, and we expose the photoresist on our wafers step by step. And the main difference between these two approaches is that in the case of the mask aligner, we can reach structure sizes of approximately 1 micrometer. And in the case of the stepper, we can reach structure sizes that are smaller, in the order of 100 nanometers. There are also direct writing techniques, where you, instead of using masks, you just use a laser to write the structure into the photoresist, or even an E-beam. And with this, you can simply draw whatever you like into your photoresist without having to prepare before a mask. And in many groups, these direct laser writers or E-beam writers are very much used because they have the the advantage to be able to create very small structures down to, in the case of laser writers, 300 nanometers. Sorry, here I wrote micrometers, but it's a 300 nanometer structure size you can reach. And with the E-beam writer, you can even go below that, which is interesting for very small Josephson junctions. So now we have the deposition technique. We have the photoresist and the structuring technique ready. Now, if we want to remove material that we want to structure, so basically we have now created a substrate with a film on top, we have patterned it, we need to somehow get away the material. That can be done, for example, with an etching step. To etch the structure after we have deposited the photoresist can happen, for example, with wet etching. Wet etching typically is just you immerse your wafer in some etchant. Depending on what you want to etch, you have to choose the proper chemical medium. You have an etching that is below the photoresist, because the photoresist is open. If it's a wet etching, typically you get something isotropic. So you get some, in the case of A here, for example, you get some sort of undercut below your photoresist, and your structures are not very straight, don't get very straight walls. But this is typically what you get with wet etching. However, there are few exceptions where you can get some sort of isotropic etching, which is the case of B, where you get very straight walls, but it's very hard to reach with wet etching, for which reason people typically tend to use also a dry etching, meaning some sort of plasma etching. We have a plasma that is created above our substrate. Our substrate is like one electrode, we have another electrode, and in between these two electrodes, that's where the plasma is. The plasma is typically something reactive, for example, something fluorine-based, so we get some chemical etching process. But by accelerating the plasma on top of the our substrate, on top of our wafer, we get a directivity. So we get some anisotropic component by this physical etching, by this simply by accelerating the plasma or the ions of the plasma onto our target. And this allows us to make straighter walls than what we are able to do with wet etching. Now we have the next step done. So we have the deposition done, we have the structuring done, we have the etching done. Then it's just the cleaning done as a next step, where we have to remove our photoresist. The photoresist can be removed, for example, with simple solvents, like in a wet way, or you could use some oxygen plasma to simply burn away your photoresist. And in the end, you're left with your structure on the substrate, which is, for example, your qubit that is left on your wafer. With this, we have the whole subtractive process covered. In that way, you can go from a single wafer where you deposit your material through a photoresist structuring process, some etching process, to actual patterned structures on your resist, which is one layer of material. If you want to do Josephson junctions, however, you need more than one layer. So there are different techniques how you can make a Josephson junctions using the steps that I just introduced. One very common step is the so-called Dolan technique, where you have a shadow evaporation technique. You create a photoresist structure which has some sort of bridge or some structure which is suspended above the substrate. So you will notice that if you evaporate aluminium at a certain angle through this double slit here, you will get two layers of aluminium, two pieces of aluminium that then can be oxidized. And if then you evaporate at another angle, due to the suspended structure, the central piece of aluminium that is oxidized will have now a second piece of aluminium on top, and having two aluminium pieces on top of each other with a small layer of oxide in between is just a Josephson junction. This technique is very common. However, it doesn't allow for very flexible designs because of this double angle technique. You will always have basically your structure double. You have always each thing you want to create on your wafer twice, which simply give some geometric constraints of what you can do with your Josephson junctions. Another approach are across Josephson junctions, where you first pattern one electrode in aluminium. This will oxidize because you break vacuum. You will structure a second layer that is a photoresist, which is perpendicular to the first one. You clean your oxide. You do a controlled reoxidation, and afterwards a deposition of more aluminium. After lifting off the photoresist, you're left with two overlapping pieces of aluminium that are separated by a thin layer of aluminium oxide, and that is again a Josephson junction. With this technique, you have more flexibility in creating your structures, because you simply have more freedom from the geometry point of view. However, it is more difficult to create small structures. It is doable, and you have, of course, the disadvantage that you have to break vacuum, you have to clean your aluminium, you have to be very sure about your cleaning step. The third process is the window type or tri-layer process, where you grow, for example, an aluminium oxide junction between two layers of niobium. So you deposit niobium, aluminium, you oxidize the aluminium and put niobium on top, which allows you to pattern a small junction that you then cover in some sort of oxide or some nitride, something like a dielectric, to define a small window through which you then can contact the top electrode with a second layer of niobium. And in that way, you have a Josephson junction between two layers, which gives you very much flexibility in terms of size and also geometries you can do. However, the disadvantage is that you have some sort of dielectric in between, which might introduce problems, for example, for qubits, because dielectrics typically tend to be lossy, and it's something we do not want for qubits. Here you see three pictures of the qubit of the junctions made with the three different techniques. The first one is the Dolan technique, where you see the double structures, and in the center you see the Josephson junction that is made by this double the overlap of those two structures. In the center, you see a cross or overlap junction, where we have two pieces of aluminium wire that are overlapping in a small area, which defines the junction. And we have on the right-hand side a picture of a window type junction made out of a tri-layer, which, however, typically is not used for qubits, but rather for example, squids. Now, Josephson junctions, you can use them for qubits, obviously, but of course there are many, many other applications. One of which is, for example, if you want to make a tunable resonant circuits. So, for example, if you just have a coplanar waveguide resonator, which is simply a piece of coplanar waveguide, which is terminated to ground. On one hand, you will have a standing wave in here, a quarter wave, and that in itself is not yet a tunable resonator. But if in the endpoint where you terminate your resonator to ground, you introduce, for example, two parallel Josephson junctions forming a squid loop, you can tune your resonator as a function of the flux in the squid. So if you have a close by flux line that allows you to manipulate the flux in the squid, you can tune your resonance frequency, which has multiple applications. The most prominent one being the parametric amplifier, where basically you modulate your resonance frequency of your resonator at twice the resonance frequency, and through a parametric conversion process, you can amplify a signal that is within the resonance bandwidth of your resonator significantly. So you can use this parametric process to amplify microwave signals. Here's just an example of how such a device could look like. You have here an input port that is then capacitively coupled to a long piece of wire, which forms a quarter wave coplanar waveguide resonator, which in the end is terminated with a squid, meaning two Josephson junctions in parallel. And then on the right side, you see the flux modulation line, which allows us to apply a microwave flux pump to parametrically modulate the resonance here and to convert to amplify a signal that we apply to the input port. That's not the end of the story. If you think to Josephson junctions as nonlinear elements, if you build superconducting circuits, there are other nonlinear elements, the most prominent one being the kinetic inductance, which you can also use to build superconducting circuits. Just a quick recap, what is kinetic inductance? If you think to a piece of metal and you apply an AC field, you will notice that the charge carriers in that piece of metal will oscillate with the field, but due to their inertia, in principle, they should lag somewhat behind the field, simply because they have a mass. And if you go through the maths, you see that the complex conductivity of each type of metal has this imaginary part, which exactly describes this kind of lagging behind of the charge carriers trying to follow the electric field. However, in normal metals, the collision time of the charge carriers, which with whatever defects, is so small, and the frequencies are also comparably small, that this imaginary part here is more or less negligible. However, if you go to superconductors, where your collision time basically grows very much and is practically infinite, you cannot neglect this part here anymore, and the charge carriers will in fact lag behind the electric field that you apply to your metal. And this lagging behind of the field is something that we can model just with an inductance, because an inductance is exactly that. It shifts the phase. It shifts the phase of the response with respect to an AC field. So we call this kinetic inductance because it's a kinetic feature, because the charge carriers are simply moving and have an inertia, and therefore they're lagging behind the field. If you go through BCS theory, you will notice that this kinetic inductance is linked to the Cooper pair density, and as the Cooper pair density itself is nonlinear with the current that you run through your superconductor, you will notice that this kinetic inductance itself is also a nonlinear inductance, just like we have it for the Josephson junctions. So we have a second nonlinear element that we can use to make superconducting circuits, and that you can use to introduce nonlinearity into your circuits. From BCS theory, you also see that your kinetic inductance will depend on the resistivity of the film, meaning resistivity obviously above the critical temperature, and also on the superconducting gap delta. Also, your nonlinearity scales as a function of the resistivity. So this I star here is basically the parameter to quantify the nonlinearity. And having this in mind, you can now choose a material that has a high enough resistivity to introduce sufficient kinetic inductance and sufficient nonlinearity. And a typical material that is used as high resistivity superconductor is, for example, maybe titanium nitride, which has a critical temperature of around 12 to 13 Kelvin, and which has a resistivity in the order of some 100 milliohm centimeters. As this is a nonlinear material, you can make use of that and also build, just like with the Josephson junction, parametric amplifiers. And one one very famous application is the traveling wave parametric amplifier, where basically you can make use of a wave mixing process that is caused by this parametric nonlinearity. And we can transfer energy from a very strong pump tone to a weak signal tone, and in that way amplify the signal in a three-wave mixing process. The reason why this is interesting is that you can amplify in the microwave regime over a very large bandwidth, and ideally you are quantum noise limited. So if you want to read out, for example, a quantum processor or whatever else, you typically want to have extremely low noise amplifiers, in the best case quantum noise limited, and that's what traveling wave parametric amplifiers offer. There are both Josephson junction based traveling wave parametric amplifiers as well as kinetic inductance based traveling wave parametric amplifiers. And if you think in terms of kinetic inductance, what you can think of is you can make a coplanar waveguide where in the center you have a central line, you have your ground planes around, and then you have these stubs that modulate your line and create an artificial transmission line, which basically means nothing else but having these stubs, you slow down your microwaves traveling through the waveguide, which increases the interaction time of the microwaves in the medium, and therefore you can enhance your amplification. Then typically you need to introduce some modulation of the length of these stubs to reach something that is called phase matching, which basically allows you to avoid some dephasing of your signal, and therefore you increase your gain by reducing this dephasing channel. Here you saw like such a line can look like. They are often in the order of tens of centimeters. So the chip itself is 10 times 20 millimeters, but having this wound, this meandering structure, you actually end up with a device that has order of 17 centimeters length. And on the right side, you see electron microscope images how such a line actually looks like, where you see that you have here in dark the actual metal, and in white you see the substrate where the metal has been removed with an etching technique. Here you have structure sizes in the order of 1 micrometer, which with stepper lithography can easily be reached. The problem is that as you have a line that is 17 centimeters long, you might suffer from defects, because even in the cleanest clean room is not perfectly clean. So if you have just one dust grain that messes up your photolithography process, you might end up with a short between your central line and the ground plane, and that will compromise the functionality of the device. And therefore, current efforts are ongoing to do a microstrip design where you separate your transmission line, so the central conductor, from the ground plane by introducing a dielectric in between. So you have not anymore a coplanar waveguide layout, but a microstrip layout. But while this has many advantages, from the microfabrication point of view, you need to now also think how to engineer low-loss dielectrics that separate these two metal layers, which is a challenge, as in the microwave regime for qubits, for traveling wave amplifiers, dielectrics typically are a killer due to the two-level systems that are present in these materials. And so there's a huge effort ongoing in trying to find low-loss dielectric materials that allow for building both kinetic inductance, but also Josephson junction-based devices with an inverted microstrip design. With this, I would like to come to the end, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much, Felix, for such a great presentation. Yes, we have some questions. One is from Sunil Karki. Why non-linearity is important on quantum circuit? Does it depend on component of circuits?
Sorry, could you say that once more? My audio is not very good, unfortunately.
Okay. Why non-linearity is important on quantum circuits? Does it depend on components of circuits?
So why the nonlinearity is important? So
Yeah.
the nonlinearity, basically for the qubit, the nonlinearity is the part that allows you to make your circuit anharmonic. So that is basically the part that allows you to operate your qubit as a qubit. That's basically let me quickly go to the slide. Here. So that's basically the nonlinearity is what makes the harmonic oscillator non-harmonic, because in a qubit, if you want to think of a qubit as a harmonic oscillator, actually it's not really usable because all the states of the qubit are equidistantly spaced. So if we want to create transitions between the different states of the qubit, we cannot address them individually. We will always address all of them, because if we put a microwave pulse, for example, that brings us from a ground state to excited state, it will address all of those. The nonlinearity in here is basically the key parameter to make this equidistant spacing non-equidistant anymore. So this is basically what introduces the unharmonicity, and so this nonlinearity is what makes the shift of the levels unequal. So the levels become addressable with a microwave tone. And this nonlinearity is introduced in, for example, in the case of the transmon qubit with our Josephson junction. You could also think of using other types of nonlinearity to build a qubit. There have been attempts to use also kinetic inductance materials, but the nonlinearity achievable with Josephson junctions is typically way larger than the one that is achievable with kinetic inductance materials. That's why for qubits, typically you work with Josephson junctions, but nonlinearity can be exploited, for example, for also these parametric processes. And in that case, also kinetic inductance is a possibility to build, for example, parametric amplifiers, where the nonlinearity allows the mixing process that transfers the energy from a pump to a signal tone that then can be, for example, part of a qubit readout system.
Thank you very much. Another question is, how do you reduce the noise generated in superconducting circuit? Do you neglect it completely or make certain approximation mathematically?
I'm sorry. I think I have a problem with my audio. It's I don't hear very well.
How do you reduce the noise generated in superconducting circuit? Do you neglect it completely or make certain approximation mathematically?
Okay. Thank you. The noise. How you basically, I mean, there are different sources of noise in superconducting circuits, each of which can or have to be addressed individually. So like one very important source of noise are two-level systems, which basically are small defects in the dielectrics of, for example, wanted dielectrics, such as the barrier of the Josephson junctions, which can have small defects, as well as defects on the surface of metals that naturally will oxidize. And these two-level systems are defects that just behave like a qubit. So they have two levels, and there are so many two-level systems that there is certainly a couple of them that will have the same energy spacing as the actual qubit you want to operate. And so there can be a coupling between the unwanted two-level system in our dielectric that can be sitting somewhere in the vicinity of our circuit and the qubit we want to operate. And so this two-level system noise drastically reduces the decoherence time as it takes out energy of the qubit. It just couples to the qubit. And this is something that from the microfabrication point of view is crucial to make materials such high quality that the number of two-level systems is as small as possible. Then, of course, you can also try to engineer circuits that are less prone to two-level system noise. As two-level systems coupled to the electric field, to the capacitive part of a circuit, you can engineer circuits that are made in such a way that they couple less to them, but you will never be able to get rid of them. Then to model two-level systems, there is very much theory ongoing, but also experimental efforts ongoing, as this is really one of the main problems in superconducting circuits, in particular for qubits.
Thank you very much.
I hope this answers the question.
I think so. Another question is there any maximum limit value for AG over AC?
Is there a maximum limit? Actually, I have never thought of it in that way. EJ is basically given by the critical current of the Josephson junction. So in principle, the larger the junction, the larger the critical current of the junction. So nothing forbids us to make just a huge junction. To increase EJ over EC, but of course that comes with quite some drawbacks, because if you increase the junction size, you will naturally also increase the capacitance of the junction. You will have more dielectric material with two-level systems, which comes with drawbacks. And EC means simply making a huge capacitor. But of course, making large circuit components also has the problem that you get a very large footprint on chips. So if you want to build a quantum processor, you want to have small components. And in particular, for example, for Josephson junctions, you want to make them as small as possible, as the dielectric of the Josephson junction, so the junction barrier, is like very prone to have these two-level systems. And as we want to reduce the number, making a large junction is something that will increase your critical current and your EJ, but it will not make you will not be able to make a usable qubit out of that in the end. So I guess theoretically you can make an arbitrarily large EJ over EC, but practically that is something that practically will not work.
Thank you. Another question is, what is the condition to tune AG over AC, and why we have to tune this? Is it to reduce error on computation?
So we have to tune EJ over EC because we want to basically go into a regime, for example, in case of the transpon, where we are not prone anymore to charge dispersion. So if we have a small EJ over EC, so that's basically the charge regime for the Cooper pair box, we have a very large sensitivity of the level spacing to the number of Cooper pairs. So if there are some fluctuations, they will lead to a very large noise in the splitting, which is something we would like to avoid. So that's why if you go to the transpon regime, where you have a larger EJ over EC, you get rid of these steep parts, and you get very, very flat level spacings, where you are not sensitive anymore to charge fluctuations. However, at the cost that the spacing between the levels becomes less and less anharmonic, because we are getting closer and closer again to a harmonic oscillator, and this level spacing that becomes more and more less and less anharmonic makes it more and more difficult to address the levels with a microwave pulse, for example. However, the anharmonicity vanishes slower with EJ over EC than what the charge dispersion does. The first one being basically 1 over the square root, the second one being exponential. And therefore, getting to the Transform regime where we have an EJ over EC that is way larger than 1, we anyways gain. That's why people are not doing Cooper pair boxes anymore, but that's why people typically nowadays are working with transmon qubits.
Thank you very much. Another question is why we use different techniques for the Josephson junctions, and which one is better and why better?
Okay, so the different techniques for the Josephson junctions have different pros and cons. Let me quickly go to the slide. So here we have the 3 different techniques. So just for the last technique, which is the window type tri-layer technique, that is typically used for complex circuit layouts, as you have them, for example, in filtered squid layouts that you use for magnetic field sensing. And these junctions can only be made with a dielectric layer in between, which is something that you do not want for a qubit. So this technique is something you use if you want to make squids, like magnetic field sensors, but you would never use that technique for qubits. For qubits, people tend to use one of the first 2 techniques. The first one, be like the Dolan technique, has the advantage that you can make a Josephson junctions without having to break the vacuum in between. So it allows you to make very high quality Josephson junctions. The 2 major drawbacks of this technique are that it's very difficult to define the actual junction area. Because of this double angle technique, it's very difficult to make precise rectangles, for example. So it's difficult to control the junction areas. And also you do not have very much flexibility in which geometries you can make, because every structure is deposited twice, and therefore you cannot, for example, have strong turns, many junctions within the turn, because you will get overlap of structures that you do not want to have. So if you need high quality Josephson junctions and not too many or not too crazy geometries, but the Dolan technique is the technique to go for. Otherwise, if you need very much design flexibility and you want to be very sure about the area of the Josephson junction you create, you would go for this cross or overlap junction technique, where the area between the top and the bottom electrode is a perfect rectangle. So you have very high control on the junction area. And also, as you do not have this double angle technique where you have basically every structure twice, you have way more freedom in your geometry. So if you would like to make some very complex circuits, many junctions in many different directions and angles, then that is the way to go for. As for qubits, at least at the moment, the number of qubits is, for many applications, still rather small. Many groups still go for the Dolan technique, but it is not very scalable. So if you at some point go to processes where you have hundreds and thousands of qubits, it's still possible, but it becomes quite difficult.
Thank you very much. And another question is from Ragana. Apart from artificial intelligence and which other superconducting materials have been used for superconducting qubit chips production?
So aluminium is the standard material, but there were quite some approaches for different types of qubits with different types of materials. On the one hand, something that is promising is tantalum, because it has a higher superconducting gap, a higher critical temperature than aluminium, which makes it attractive because the temperature which has to be reached to operate qubits out of tantalum are not as low as for aluminium. So if you want to build a large-scale quantum computer and it should be scalable, that is something that will be important, as of course cooling down aluminium to millikelvin temperatures is simply very expensive. And it's just like it's not very well explored how to make junctions with tantalum. There are some efforts, but aluminium junctions are just the ones that work best for the moment. So even if you go, for example, to other materials, people have also been doing niobium squids. The actual Josephson junction is most likely made out of aluminium, just because there's very high control on the aluminium oxide. So the junction itself is most likely aluminium if it's not tantalum, even though the circuit itself might be out of, for example, niobium. Then people have tried to use also high kinetic inductance materials and embed them into circuits, into qubits, where still you have an aluminium Josephson junction, but to reduce the footprint of the qubit and to enhance the nonlinearity, the metal that is used for the wiring and for all other parts of the qubit is, instead of aluminium, made out of, for example, niobium titanium nitride. So this is another material that has been used, but these are then these hybrid kind of qubits that are not very common. So all the standard qubits, also all the big processors that have been made so far, are all just aluminium.
Thank you very much. Actually, we have 2 questions more, but we're taking your time, actually. If you have time again for the question again, we can.
I'm happy to take more questions. So if there are more questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you very much. We have just 2 questions more. If we do sputtering technique, we can able to achieve thin films rather than single crystal. For qubits, we require a single crystal, right?
So typically, if we with sputtering, we do not do single crystals. So basically, if we sputter, we get many small crystallites. So we have a granular structure. So we with sputtering, typically you do not get single crystals. I'm not sure if I got the question right, but the wafer, the substrate, like the silicon is always a single crystal, but the film on top is always made out of many crystallites.
Okay, thank you. The last question is, which software are you using to design the GPI?
So which software? Basically, I think there are many softwares around. I mean, people usually use some Python-based softwares like Qiskit, which I think is an IBM based software. There are people that simply do at least for single qubits designs by hand, but I think for more complex circuits, the most common one is like Qiskit. At least most people I know are using Qiskit, which is Python based.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Felix. I know we take your time much, but our audience consider about this subject very much, I think, and like your presentation also. We enjoyed a lot. Thank you very much for such a great information for us. And also, I wish to Dr. Federica to be well soon. Thank you very much, Felix.
Thank you very much. I was very happy to be able to give this talk, and I will tell Federica your wishes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, everyone, we have come to the end of today's session. First of all, I would like to thank our guests for their wonderful presentation, and all of you for taking the time to wait until the end of the session. Our program will continue tomorrow with amazing speakers again. We will happy to see you among us tomorrow. Take care and goodbye.